And put those teams at a competitive disadvantage.
The NBA and Players Union are still trying to finalize the plan. Lawmakers in Washington are expressing dismay at the difficulty voters have encountered in recent elections. More from ABC's Adam Kelsey.
At a Thursday press conference, Speaker Nancy Pelosi decrying the obstacles to participation she saw in Georgia Tuesday, including hours-long lines to cast ballots.
It was either a disgrace of incompetence or a disgrace of intention to suppress the vote.
Pelosi warned that the conditions could be a prelude to November's election and accused Republicans of embracing suppression tactics. Adam Kelsey, ABC News, Washington.
Kind of a free fall on Wall Street this morning. The Dow is down nearly 1,500 points. That's over 5.5%. The S&P is down 149 and the NASDAQ down 392. Coming up, 90s are back. Well, at least for a couple days. Weather's next. KSL News Time, 11:01.
Even with school and work upside down right now, we're here.
Markets out of whack? We're here.
We're here for you with important news before 9.
You can always count on us.
KSL Newsradio, Utah's all-day companion for news.
It's Ivy Interior's annual floor model clearance and warehouse sale, June 11th through the 13th. This is one of Ivy Interior's biggest sales of the year. Enjoy savings between 40 and 70% off. Ivy Interiors is making room for new inventory and has a large selection of overstocked, discontinued, and scratch and dent items. Save on such brands as King Hickory, Norwalk Bradington Young, Sam Moore, Hooker Furniture, Four Hands, Universal, and more. Sofas, chairs, dining sets, consoles, chests, rugs, lamps, art, and accessories in a wide range of styles are included in this sale. Ivy Interiors cares about its customers' health and safety. So in response to COVID-19, the store is practicing social distancing at all times. It's Ivy Interiors' annual floor model clearance and warehouse sale, June 11th through the 13th. Visit Ivy Interiors at 3174 South Highland Drive and find us online at ivyinteriorsutah.com. All clearance and warehouse sales are final. See store for details. Don't miss this incredible sale. Ivy Interiors. Live your style.
It's time to talk Utah travel adventures where you can actually get out of the house and travel around Utah. There's so many things to do and see. We're talking right now with Maria Twitchell. She's the executive director for Visit Cedar City, Brian Head. Maria, Shakespeare Festival. The shrew has been tamed. What else have you got going on down there?
Yeah, well, we know it's kind of sad that got canceled, but you know what? This is the opportunity where you can be the star of your own adventure. So inviting everyone to come down to Cedar City to enjoy. We've got hundreds and hundreds of miles of trails. Whether you like to hike, if you like to mountain bike, if you like to do OHVing, we've definitely got a trail for you. And many of these trails have been built or have been designated just in the last couple of years. And so there's just a whole bunch of new territory that you can explore, whether it's east, up in the Dixie National Forest. You can go out into the desert. You can go into some amazing hill country, and you can get your social distancing in while you're at it. We have Cedar Breaks National Monument, which if you're a fan of Bryce Canyon, this is the smaller version, but more colorful. It's at a higher elevation, so you are definitely in the cool temperatures, and it's just covered with alpine meadows and trees, so you can definitely get some really quality mountain time. But of course, we've got the Red Rocks in that mix, so it makes for the great photography, beautiful places to go fishing, and in more hiking and that you can imagine.
So you've got pretty much everything going on there.
We're surrounded by all the natural wonders of southern Utah, and we have the amenities of a bigger city, as well as all the things that you can go out and do.
And what about accommodations?
Yes, we have 2 new resorts in Cedar City, plus RV parks with full hookups and all the familiar favorites. And while you're here, check out the Silver Silo Bakery.
And where do we go to find out what to do in Cedar City?
The easiest thing is go to our website, which is visitcedarcity.com.
Get news all day on the KSL Newsradio app and on the app for radio.com.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Mountain America, your home for home loans. Here's Ricky Meese. Sunshine and 90 today. Right now it's 77 and partly cloudy at KSL News Radio 102.7 FM, 1160 AM and KSLNewsRadio.com. This is Utah's all-day companion for news.
This is a candidate forum for Republican candidates for Utah governor. In-depth conversations with Boyd Matheson, host of KSL's Inside Sources, and Miles Hasen, president and CEO of Utah's World Trade Center, on KSL News Radio.
Welcome, everyone, to a special 90-minute forum here on KSL News Radio. I am Boyd Matheson, opinion editor of the Deseret News. Very grateful to be joined by friend and colleague Miles Hasen, CEO of World Trade Center Utah, as we have this important discussion with the 4 Republican candidates vying for the nomination coming up here on June 30th. Just a reminder that today's forum will be available to listen to on demand on KSL News Radio, KSL Politics podcast, as well as the Inside Sources podcast, accessible on the KSL News Radio app and at KSLNewsRadio.com. And this is just going to be a fascinating conversation, an important conversation. And Miles, very grateful to have the opportunity to tag team partner with you on this conversation. When the opportunity arose, it was like, okay, World Trade Center Utah is so well positioned to really lead out, not just in the country, but around the world. And grateful to have you here with us as a part of the tag team question crew as we get to these today.
Thank you, Boyd, for having us. And I'm really grateful for the partnership with KSL News Radio and the chance to have you be my tag team partner in running through these questions and having this discussion with each of the candidates. This is such an important topic and such a pivotal moment in our state's history, our country's history, and really around the world as we think about COVID-19, as we look at some of the social unrest. You know, these are big, important issues, and they're all taking place within a global framework and context. And Boyd, you've been such a consistent voice for many years on the importance of Utah continuing to lead out nationally and internationally. So today we're going to be talking with the candidates about the legacy of international engagement that we've had here in the state of Utah since our founding, the vision that each candidate has for how they would lead out and carry on this legacy, and then dive down into the specific policies and actions that they would take to make sure that this global engagement is driving prosperity here at home and across the country.
Fantastic. And our forum today, again, focused more on this unique place of Utah in the world. We know there are many other issues that are being debated in a lot of the other forums and debates that have been happening as we come down the home stretch of this Republican governor's race. And so today we will focus primarily on the economics, the international component to this, and we'll let the other forums handle some of those other issues as well. All right, we're going to get right at it then. Our first candidate to join us today, and we did agree that we would do introductions and then use first names after that. So we will welcome the Lieutenant Governor to the state of Utah, Spencer Cox. Spencer, thanks for joining us today.
Boyd and Miles, it's always great to be with you. Thank you for putting this on.
All right, we're going to get right at it, and we're going to do this deep dive style today. So I will lob the first question, and we'll get underway. So, Spencer, Utah has a rich history, long heritage as it relates to being a force for good, not just in the state, in the West, not just in the nation, but around the world. We've got this amazing free market economy, strong institutions of civil society. And so what do you think that legacy is? Why is that important? And what does it mean to you as a possible governor to carry that legacy forward during this real pivotal time in the history of the country and the world?
Well, Boyd, it's a really important question, and thank you to your listeners who are joining us today. Utah does have an incredible legacy of impacting not just our nation, but our world. And a lot of people don't know this, but as the Lieutenant Governor, I serve as the Secretary of State. And over the past 7 years, I have met with hundreds of international diplomats and dignitaries, ambassadors and business leaders, trade delegations from all over the world. And Utah receives significant international attention. We're not the same state we were just 10 years ago. No other state our size has nearly as many international guests as we do. We benefit from a lot of Utah stakeholders who have significant international presence. We have, of course, a major international religion headquartered here in Utah. We hosted the 2002 Winter Olympics. In 2019, just last year, we hosted the UN Civil Society Conference. Several of our universities have international reach and a physical presence elsewhere. And of course, even our own Utah Jazz are the most international team in the NBA right now. But we are also a state built on foreign immigrants. We understand foreign cultures because they are literally part of our DNA. As we've grown, we've welcomed new refugees and immigrants. They become part of the fabric of our state. But we also understand the importance of international business. Utah is the rare inland state that understands the importance of international logistics, and we are developing an inland port, which is going to help us just broaden those opportunities. As governor, I will continue this strong legacy with an unwavering devotion and increased international growth. Some of my own ancestors came from England. Their faith brought them here. One of my ancestors was actually a servant to the Queen of England back in the 1800s. But here in the United States, she found an opportunity to become her own master and to create her own opportunity. And today, Utah still stands as a beacon of economic opportunity, an exemplar of that international hospitality. And as we welcome the world, we will continue to prosper here in the state of Utah.
All right, Miles.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Spencer, for that overview. From the World Trade Center Utah perspective, we are here to help facilitate that international engagement. We appreciate you've always been a great partner to us in that effort. And then to translate that into very distinct economic benefits for Utah companies here in the state. And then just a little bit of data for you and the listeners, and then I'll ask a question. So international trade and investment now supports nearly 1 in 4 jobs here in the state of Utah. You know that Utah's economy, that the backbone of our economy is small business. 85% of exporters in the state are small businesses, and international sales add more than $5 billion in revenue for Utah small businesses here in the state. And for the past 2 years, Utah has led the nation with the highest export growth rate. So now a question, based on your interaction with businesses across the state, where do you see the greatest opportunities to build on the international trade investment success we've had, particularly now as we look forward towards recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I'm so glad, Miles, that you shared that data, because I think most Utahns are surprised when I tell them, did you know that we have led the nation in economic growth, international economic growth over the past 2 years? Again, that's mind-boggling. When we have these foreign delegations come, they say, we see the numbers. We're trying to figure out what's happening here in Utah. Why is Utah the best state to do business, not just nationally, but internationally? And right now, we are witnessing the greatest international relations calibration, perhaps in world history. Within this chaos that we're facing, there is an optimal way forward, but our strategy must be to create international opportunities for Utah businesses. People will come and go, but Utah businesses will be the greatest asset to the Utah international brand. It really is focusing internally for us to succeed externally. And Utah is the best positioned state to take advantage coming out of this crisis. We know again what businesses are part of the United Kingdom brand. We know what businesses are part of the 5 Asian Tigers brand. International dynamics post-COVID-19, though, will separate the have from the have-nots like nothing we have ever seen. We really have an opportunity here to lean in. We have to remember that the foundations of our economy here in Utah were strong pre-coronavirus, and that matters. We led the nation in private sector job growth over the last 10 years. We have the most diverse economy in the nation, and that's going to allow Utah to be a big winner coming out of the coronavirus. We must help, especially manufacturers, pivot to producing those goods that have strong demand in international markets. We must focus on recruiting international businesses that will stabilize the supply chains in Utah's critical industry. This is going to be the biggest change post-pandemic, is a nationwide focus, a refocus on onshoring and creating domestic manufacturing capacity. And Utah can be in the middle of this. I have been part of seeing those supply chains break down in Asia, China especially. It's why I released recently my Self-Reliant Utah plan. It's a 7-step plan that outlines the key areas our state needs to focus on to become more resilient, stable, and prosperous in coming decades. A quick example of this is the Merit Medical, who pivoted to start making the swabs necessary for testing, something they never would have considered making. However, the demand for these swabs remains strong and allows them to enter the market they had never considered, but for which there is a significant demand. We are going to see a manufacturing renaissance post-COVID here in this country, and Utah is going to lead that movement.
Right. Boyd, I think it's important right there because Spencer brought up a really good example with Merit Medical. I was on a call just about a week and a half ago at the White House talking about the opportunity we have to reshore companies back here to the United States. And Merit Medical, the success that they've had, what they've done is something that's recognized there and across the country. And it's a great example of the way that Utah can pivot and can succeed as we move forward in this COVID world that we're all living in. Boyd, over to you.
Absolutely. And we're about halfway in here, Spencer. So if you're just joining us, so this is part of a special 90-minute gubernatorial forum here on KSL News Radio. I'm Boyd Matheson, joined by Miles Hasen from World Trade Center, Utah. Currently in the hot seat is Spencer Cox, Lieutenant Governor. And so we're going to pick up the pace here just a little bit, Spencer, as we go forward, as we talk about the economic prosperity, all of the opportunities that the state has. I want to really drive it down to the individual level, what it means for us. And in particular, as we talk about economic prosperity, how do we ensure that our minority communities and our rural communities are part of that prosperity here in the state of Utah?
Yeah, thanks, Boyd. I'll be a little quicker on these answers. I know we do have limited time, but 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to partner with the World Trade Center and to take our message out to rural communities, to share with them the ability to open markets so that they could take advantage of this incredible success that we're seeing here as a state, but unfortunately is leaving some of them out. Just a couple quick numbers. In 2019, Utah had approximately 17.3 billion in exports, but very little of that is going to rural or minority businesses. The Business Roundtable estimates that there are more than 389,000 jobs in Utah that are supported by trade. That's an increase of over 10% in Utah jobs. So we're seeing that, but we want to make sure everybody can participate in that. We have Bailey Farms in rural Utah where they're cubing hay and selling it to Asia and the Middle East. That's one example of a rural company that's been able to figure this out. Let me just conclude by saying this. It is our biggest weakness, getting that out to our minority communities, multicultural communities, and rural communities. Currently, the Governor's Office of Economic Development and the World Trade Center have a combined total of 1 export outreach specialist. That is unacceptable. We need to have a dramatically better outreach program. Again, this isn't about bringing the world to Utah. It's about knowing Utah businesses well enough to take them to the world. We've already opened the doors to the world, but we have to understand our local economy and our local businesses and then help them make that connection. And that's why we have the World Trade Center.
All right, next question to Miles.
Yep, absolutely. The one specialist, Jim Porter, there's only one of them, but he's doing phenomenal work. We're working through great partners across the state to really do make a big impact for our companies. Spence, we've talked about how the economy has changed, and we've talked about the need and the opportunity to be prepared, to be self-reliant, to bring back manufacturers here to Utah as people realize that the premium of having shorter, more diversified supply chains. And yet at the same time, we're seeing an increase in protectionist sentiments. People are fearful about the global economy. People want security. And you see people talking about putting up trade barriers to try to achieve that security. Here in Utah, we all should be familiar with Smoot-Hawley and protectionist trade policies that came into place in the midst of the Great Depression, it made things worse. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on, as governor, how would you balance the need to be prepared and self-reliant while ensuring that as a state, we don't lose sight of the critical role free and open global markets have played in building so much growth and prosperity across the state for decades?
Thanks, Miles. So important. And too often in politics, in our country today, we're always asked to, we're given a false choice that you either have to choose between our local economies and our local workers, or we have to choose free trade with other countries. That is a false choice. It's important to note that protectionist policies have always backfired. You just mentioned one of them. While open and free trade has always led to more prosperity, and the COVID impacts on the world economy will provide an opportunity to benefit the state if we can help Utah businesses to understand and benefit from that changing international dynamics. We can't deviate from this critical foundation of free trade, but we can work with our federal partners to aggressively pursue and protect free trade. We also, though, must push back on the harmful and predatory trade policies that some nations employ. Being protectionist is happening, and I think it's important to ask that question. Why are we becoming more protectionist? Well, there's two reasons. One, because other countries are not playing fairly. We have to have the right set of rules, and we have to push back on those countries like China who are taking advantage of us, and I'm grateful that the president has been pushing back on them. But two, we also can't forget those workers who have lost their jobs because of free trade. We have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help them, to reskill them, to upskill them, to make sure that they have the ability to participate in the areas of our economy that are growing. I strongly believe that if we are incredibly thoughtful and intentional, the changing global dynamics will allow Utah to create a more prominent global position and correct significant trade imbalances without having to rely on protectionist policies. But again, it comes back to Utah businesses and how we help them prepare to become more prominent on the world stage, not the other way around.
All right, we've got just a few minutes left with Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox. Spencer, as you look at the possibility of winning this race and potentially winning in November, as you look to the first 100 days, what do you think are the biggest risks facing the Utah economy? And specifically, what would you do in those first 100 days to make sure that continues?
Well, certainly. I mean, that's, it's an easy question, and everyone can answer this. The biggest risk that we face right now is the coronavirus and the significant economic damage that it has done. But there are some silver linings. We have the fifth fewest restrictions economically of any state in the nation. We led the nation in fewest job losses in the month of April. We are, according to Forbes, according to the White House, according to Harvard, we are one of 10 states that will lead the nation's economic recovery. More broadly, though, our biggest risk is a failure to capitalize on all the international capabilities of our businesses and our people. In Utah, we speak more languages than per capita than any other state in the nation. In Utah, we have access to infrastructure for efficient delivery of our Utah-produced goods, including the inland port, which is moving forward in a big way. In our Utah businesses ship raw goods, airplane parts, agricultural goods, airbags, integrated circuits, coal, healthcare, all of these things and products all over the globe. We have so many international capabilities. Our biggest risk and where we have the biggest opportunity is capitalizing on all of our international capabilities. And that's where we're going to focus in a Cox-Henderson administration.
All right, we've got just 2 minutes to go. Miles, quick question, and Spencer, really quick answer.
Yes, Spencer, as you think about, we've covered a lot of territory here. Are there any economic or global opportunities that we haven't talked about yet that you would pursue as governor? And you can take a step back and get broader beyond just the international trade and investment. Final thoughts from you on what other policies you pursue as governor.
Well, again, let me just summarize here. It's about focusing on Utah businesses. We live in the most incredible state in the nation. There's a reason that we have had the best economy in the nation over the past 10 years. And there is a reason that we are going to lead this nation out of this economic crisis. We're not yet utilizing some basic opportunities for that international growth. One quick example, my alma mater, Utah State University, Go Aggies, holds one of the largest international small satellite conferences every year, a conference most of you have probably never heard of. We have prominent businesses and organizations coming in from all over the world to attend. We need to do a better job of working with those businesses who may want to partner with these businesses but aren't even aware and aren't attending. I believe that the diplomacy is important, and as governor, I would use diplomatic relationships with foreign elected officials for Utah businesses. We also have not done a great job of harnessing the power that comes from international business to business settings. We need to target more international trade shows, air shows, and other places where we can optimize the state's influence with those we want to attract to the state. But let me just conclude by saying this. We are so lucky to live here in the state of Utah. It is a matter of focus, but the focus needs to be inward, making sure that we are preparing our businesses for the global market. That's what I've done over the past 7 years, and that's what I will continue to do as governor of this great state. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and remember to vote Cox Henderson.
All right, Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll let you exit stage right, and appreciate your time there as we reset the schedule here. Again, if you're just joining us on KSL News Radio, I am Boyd Matheson, opinion editor of the Deseret News. Great to be joined today by my tag team partner, Miles Hasen, CEO of World Trade Center Utah, in a special candidate forum featuring the candidates for governor for the nomination of the Republican Party coming up here on June 30th. Ballots should be hitting your mailbox. If they didn't yesterday, they should today. We want everyone to engage and vote. And I think we are just waiting for Ambassador Huntsman to join us. And do we have the ambassador on? Okay, we're just waiting just a second here. If you did miss the any portion of the debate today, you can go and pick that up on our podcast on Inside Sources or on the KSL News Radio app. All right, I think we've got Ambassador Jon Huntsman on the line. You there, Ambassador?
Hey, Boyd, can you hear me?
There we go. And welcome to this forum. And especially, we know you're not at 110% as you would be with the coronavirus, but we appreciate you stepping up and taking a swing today. And we're going to go fast and furious on this round. We welcome you to the program. Miles Hasen and I will be doing the drilling, and we'll see how much ground we can cover in the next 17 minutes. And I want to dive right into it and get into Utah has this history and this rich legacy of being really a window in and a window out to the world when it comes to a free market economy and strong institutions of civil society. And I want you to start by just sharing with us your vision. Why, as governor, would it be important for you to make sure we carry on that legacy of pressing out to the country and to the world? And what would you do to make sure that in a very challenging time in world history that Utah continues to lead?
Well, Boyd, thanks for having me. And Miles, it's a pleasure to be with you, my friend. I'm glad we're talking about the World Trade Center. It was something that was a big part of what I did when I was governor last time. And I brought in Lou Kramer to be the first director, and he really did a terrific job in terms of maximizing our potential. And a lot of it stemmed from my basic and fundamental belief, which is not unique. I think anybody might have this, is that you cannot prosper as an economy. I don't care whether you're an ocean going state like California or New York, or whether you're landlocked like we are. You have to be engaged with the rest of the world, because ultimately markets are going to be interested in your products. And exporters, whether they're agriculture or small or medium-sized businesses, can access those export opportunities, which bring in revenue and employ people. I mean, you've looked at the numbers here. I mean, 1 in 4 of our jobs is tied to exports. In the agricultural sector, it's a good 20%. 20% of our state's GDP is tied to exports, and the ag sector alone is probably $500 million. So I think we're scratching the surface. I think the World Trade Center has delivered on what the original vision was, which is to be a convening center where people can learn about market opportunities that they wouldn't have any reason to know about otherwise. And it's there that they could access experts. They could be explained the basics about how you get a product into a foreign market, which is sometimes a very complicated thing to do. And I think that will always be part of our economic base. And we're an entrepreneurial state. We've got startup companies that immediately after they start have products that are destined or ripe for foreign markets. And the only way to maximize our state's potential is to have a window to the rest of the world that gives people clear knowledge and understanding of what some of those opportunities could be. So let me just say the here and now, though, is I've never seen a more remarkable convergence of politics and economics and frankly, uncertainty that allow for Utah to seize the moment. So we have a moment in time that, just isn't ordinary, where by establishing ourselves as a crossroads of the world, I think we can establish a position as a go-to market, surrounded by a sea of confusion and instability, marketing ourselves as a center of calm, predictability, reliability, regulations that aren't onerous, and taxes that are low, a clean state in that sense, because I think the migration of labor, movement of capital and manufacturing that we're going to see in the next few years is probably unlike any time since World War II. So to have a governor who understands these trends, how the markets move, and can bring it home, I think will be a huge opportunity for this state. But we've got to get after it and understand basically how best to market the state and how to present ourselves. And all capital, as both of you know, looks for a safe haven to park itself. And right now, I'm guessing you have probably $1 trillion or more that's up for grabs, whether it's private equity or whether it's venture capital, that is looking for safe havens. You've got manufacturing and supply chain opportunities that are going to leave some of the riskier markets, and they're going to find other safe havens. So I've never seen the global marketplace so full of opportunities for this state if we play our cards right. And the World Trade Center can absolutely be a leader in forging out ahead, helping with a plan, helping articulate the assets and the opportunities that exist in this state in collaboration with the private sector.
Well, Jon, thank you for being with us today. And thank you for setting up the World Trade Center in Utah. It gave me an opportunity to come back here to Utah. Otherwise, I'd still be in Washington, D.C. or living overseas somewhere. And thank you. I'm glad you brought up Lou Kramer. Lou Kramer, for anybody who knows him, and that's just about everybody, they know that he is the greatest import to the state of Utah, probably since Brigham Young. Johnny, you talked a little bit about some of the data and how important international trade and investment is to our economy. How it's been that way for decades. It will continue to be that way. A couple more data points for our listeners. We all know that small business is the backbone of Utah's economy. 85% of Utah's exporters are small businesses, with international sales adding nearly $5 billion in revenue for these small businesses every single year. And for the past 2 years, Utah has led the nation with the highest export growth rate in our country. Based on your interaction with businesses across the state, where do you see the greatest opportunities to build on the international trade and investment success we've had, particularly now as we look towards recovering from the COVID pandemic?
Well, with the marketplaces in flux, it may be impossible to answer that question because I'm one who believes in the free market. I think we have opportunities that are yet unborn. And I think over the next few years, we're going to find some opportunities, new startup businesses combined with existing manufacturers and small businesses who will have a heyday as it relates to export opportunities. Let's remember that the marketplace is flat right now. In fact, I talked to a major manufacturing company yesterday, their CEO, who basically said they have not had orders from some of the major markets of the world since February. So let's remember that the global marketplace in many senses has been dead. Consumers are not engaged, manufacturing is not occurring, and it's almost like the whole machinery of global trade will have to be restarted. It will be restarted, and when it restarts, I think we're going to find that we have a whole new range of opportunities. But I think, as it relates to our state, small businesses, and even those in the agricultural sector, I was talking to a dairy farmer just a couple of weeks ago. And he said, we're finding really interesting export opportunities in all places, Southeast Asia. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, because we make a value-added product that is so unique and so well liked by foreign consumers. And I thought, well, I've heard that story 100 times in this state. We can make niche products that are unlike any other, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in technology. And consumer markets love American products. I mean, that's just a fundamental reality. And value-added components and products for large and growing middle classes. So if you just stop to assume that, the largest consuming middle classes in the world are now in China and India, where they've got middle classes with disposable income that are pushing, 300 to 400 million people. And these markets have been turned off temporarily, at least they've been slowed down, but they're going to be up and running again. And I think we have a huge opportunity to capture some of these higher value added markets for agriculture and for niche products and for technology and anything else. One of my concerns is, so I have a plan to double our state's GDP over the next 10 years. One of my concerns longer term, if we're going to make ourselves a crossroads of the world, we're not making any big products here, the stuff that really makes the economy function. I mean, we don't build airplanes, we don't build cars. They're downstream petrochemical manufacturing. A lot of it can't be done here, but with an inland port, it can. That's a game changer. So as we look to the future, a lot of what we talk about in terms of today's opportunities cannot be answered today. But 5 and 10 years from now, which is the horizon that we should be looking at, we could be an export dynamo that we're not even envisioning today, making products that have moved from other states and even other countries to this safe haven of a state that is great for employees and workers with higher wage compensation and great for our economic base. And if we're going to double our state's GDP, I've looked at 3 specific industries that will allow us to do that are going to be critical to America's future. And I want to be part of that because someone's going to benefit. And those are biotechnology and health sciences, which is a global business. The other is finance, which is a huge global business. Why did Charlotte capture the marketplace out of nowhere? I mean, nobody imagined Charlotte, North Carolina would ever be a finance center of the world, but it is. I want to do that. If we can host Goldman Sachs and host them very well, that's a small beginning to an ecosystem that should be, a $100 billion ecosystem. And then the third is defense. So we have a state that's tailor-made for cyber, for the next generation of drones, for next generation warfare and weapon systems. We've got a whole 1/5 of our western part of the state that's totally for R&D. And we're kind of scratching the surface. I want to call, my friends in, Marilyn Hughes at Lockheed Martin and David Calhoun, the new CEO at Boeing, and say, why is it that we can't make airplanes here? Why is it that other landlocked states are getting the opportunity and we're not? So just looking at our future and the possibilities, I get really, really excited because these aren't ordinary times. Extraordinary times, and we should be seizing the moment as a crossroads of the world.
All right, we're got about 8 minutes to go. If you're just joining us here on KSL News Radio, I'm Boyd Matheson, host of Inside Sources, and Miles Hasen from the World Trade Center, Utah. We're currently with Jon Huntsman talking about his vision for Utah and the economy. And John, the next question I wanted to throw to you as we kind of pick up the pace in this back half of the question forum. We talk a lot about the economic prosperity, and we really want that from our governor to lead for all Utahns, for minority communities, multicultural communities, and our rural communities. So as governor, what would a Huntsman administration do to ensure that everyone is being part of this, as you say, crossroads to the world? And how do we make sure everyone's participating and benefiting?
Well, that's pretty simple. Let's have a marketplace that works for everybody. Let's not have crony capitalism. Let's have a marketplace that is clean and competitive when it comes to taxes. That's why I worked so hard on tax reform when I was last governor. We still have the same tax system we did, when I was governor. We delivered the first flat tax in the country, and it's a competitive code, but it does still need to be worked on. And let's take a good look at regulatory reform. I don't think we've done that in a very, very long time. So what are the top 50 regulations that hinder business startup and success? I don't care what your background is, what your point of origin is, whether you're just an entrepreneur, you're trying to expand onto an established business. I think a clean marketplace, a competitive marketplace with the state government, because that really is their role. They should always be looking at the competitive dynamic of what it is they're in charge of. So the state, has enormous power through taxation and regulation. They can kill business. They can put people out. But on the other hand, they can also create very competitive markets that attract capital and allow business startup from any source. And that's the kind of marketplace we want to be, and encourage people, regardless of their background or their means, if they want to start up a business and give it a go, this should be the market that spells opportunity, that spells hope. If you can't make it happen here, you can't make it happen anywhere. And I think that's really what we should aspire to for everybody.
All right, Miles.
Yeah, as we think about the impact of COVID-19, and John, you've talked about the opportunities that it creates. What I've been concerned about, and it's been kind of in the back of my mind for the past couple of weeks, is we are seeing a strong desire for security, for economic security. There's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of uncertainty. And with that has come a rise in protectionist sentiment. This idea that if we put up barriers, that's going to lead to our security. There's no question that we have opportunities and a need to make sure that we're prepared to think about self-reliance. It's clear that there is increased value now in shorter supply chains, more diversified supply chains. But this protectionist sentiment is something that I think could become a drag on the economy, could prevent us from taking full advantage of the disruption that's in global markets. So I'd be curious for your thoughts, Governor or Ambassador Huntsman. How would you balance the need to be prepared and self-reliant while ensuring that as a state we don't lose sight of the critical role free and open global markets have played in building so much growth and prosperity across the state for decades?
Well, thanks, Miles, and you can call me John. I'm not big on those titles, but it's really kind of a myth that we have a free market out there because virtually every country in the world is protectionist. From an average weighted tariff standpoint, we're probably as competitive as any. You look at Hong Kong and Singapore, South Korea, they're probably below 5% on an average weighted tariff basis. But you look at some of the others that we compete with, and not only do they have tariff barriers, they have huge non-tariff barriers that really make it impossible to get your product into the marketplace. So let's always remember that stability, political stability, will lead to economic stability. And that's why I think it's so important in this state to measure up and to be seen as a safe haven, because we don't go anywhere unless we have capital, unless we have a clean regulatory system. Those are the fundamentals of being able to take off. And then as we look to the outside world, there are always going to be markets that are accessible. You'll have some that are problematic. There always will be. The Chinese market will always be problematic. And we can go into an 8-hour conversation on that one, but they're in a state of flux, and they will be. And a lot of manufacturing is moving from China simply because the labor rates are getting very high, and they're moving to South Asia. And so over the next 25 to 50 years, you're going to see not just population but economics, trade and investment migrate somewhere between South Asia and Africa. That will be, the later part of the century. But right now, there are barriers to trade. There will always be barriers to trade, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't always be able to find opportunities that match the aspirations of our exporters. And quite frankly, it's probably good that we're taking after the Chinese on intellectual property protection. I co-chaired the National Commission on Intellectual Property Theft with Admiral Denny Blair, who was our former Director of National Intelligence. We spent a year on the report, and it right now is the template that the Trump administration is using to take after China in terms of the tools we have to stop their rampant theft of property, which probably measures up to $300 billion per year in lost output and innovation. out of our hides in the United States. So it's a big deal, and it's about time that somebody take after them, and we're doing that. But these things are going to go on, and the trade friction will always exist. But much of the marketplace is going to be open, and that's what I love about international trade is we can always find opportunities that match our aspirations.
All right, we've got just 1 minute to go, so quick answer here. Final question, and that is we have a lot of risks, obviously, to maintain our economic prosperity. As you look at a first 100 days in a Huntsman administration, what would you do to make sure we're addressing the big risks and making sure we're getting towards the big success and prosperity?
So the big risk is always going to say, if capital isn't coming here, then we need to know why. And it's exactly what I did as governor before. So capital is a coward. It will always flee risk and find a safe haven. I want more capital. So why is Denver getting more capital than we are? We should ask those hard questions and say, what more can we do? And that's going to take us right to our regulatory circumstances. It's going to take us to our tax policy. And it's going to take right to where people perceive our market to be on a global basis in terms of safety. And those are the issues you have to address first and foremost. If you don't do that, then you're just going to be talking and talking endlessly and never getting any result.
All right. Jon Huntsman, former ambassador from the U.S. to Russia and China, candidate for the Republican nominee for governor here in the state of Utah. Thanks so much for joining us today, sir. And we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right. Again, if you're just joining us, it's a 90-minute special gubernatorial forum today brought to you by KSL Inside Sources and World Trade Center Utah, my tag team partner, Miles Hasen. And we just heard from the former governor, former ambassador Jon Huntsman, and his view of the economics and Utah's unique place in the world. And I believe now we have former Speaker of the House, Greg Hughes, is next into the hot seat. Mr. Speaker, welcome to the program.
It's Greg. You can call me Greg. Citizen Greg.
Citizen Greg. All right, we're going to get right at it. The shot clock is set for 17 minutes, and we're going to try to move through as much as we can here. We've been talking a lot about Utah's unique place in the world, the history of the state as one that is not content to just be here, but reaches out as an example to the nation and to the world in so many things. As governor, what's your role in terms of continuing that legacy? What does it mean to carry that legacy of a world vision on there? And what do you think the opportunities are in terms of this unique, challenging time that we live in?
Well, thanks for having me on the program. And we've got a great advocate in Miles Hasen. I've enjoyed traveling internationally with him when I was Speaker of the House and working on these very issues. And we've got a great champion in him. He's truly a leader. We're lucky to have him in the state of Utah. This is what we are. We're a pioneering state. And when I say pioneering, not just from around the United States, but from all over the world. That's the history and heritage of our state. You add from that the being a pioneering state, the fact that we have children in dual language immersion classes. You've got let me look. We got almost 60,000 kids that are going and learning new languages, and they're not just learning the language; they're learning curriculum in those languages. And those languages, they're Spanish, Chinese, French, Portuguese. These kids, I've been to the assemblies when these children are presenting to their parents and their grandparents. I'm sitting there as a lawmaker. I don't understand a word these kids are saying, but the grins on the faces of these parents, grandparents, family members, you couldn't see more proud family, because we know the world is flat. We know that the global supply chain is getting stronger. And I know what's in the minds of these families. They see these children with an economic advantage, a way to pursue with language skills, not only their life as the world gets smaller, but also economic opportunities. And if you look at our numbers of students learning dual language immersion courses the way we are, where they're college ready by the time before they get to high school, that puts us at a competitive advantage that no other state can touch. We have not just by per capita as a smaller state, by raw number of students, we have far more students than any other state. So you take that, you take a pioneering state, you take the dual immersion, and then you take the predominant faith, where we have people that go all over this world and learn new cultures and experience and meet new people, bringing back that perspective to the state. I don't know a state that could be more prepared for a global supply chain and for economic development internationally. And I'm proud as governor. I'd be proud to lead that this state and all it's done up till now and make sure we continue it forward.
All right, over to Miles.
Yep. Greg, great to see you on screen. I think the listeners would appreciate this. When we were traveling internationally, we went into a suit shop. And I'll tell you, I've never seen somebody that's more effective at negotiating a price of a suit than Greg is. I've got a couple of great priced, good looking suits. Thanks to you, Greg. So I appreciate it. Appreciate that, helping all of us look good, and for your leadership on that trip.
Right now,
so Greg, a little bit of data, and then I'll ask a question. Yeah. So international trade and investment supports nearly 1 in 4 jobs here in the state of Utah. We know that the backbone of Utah's economy is small business, and 85% of exporters here in the state are small businesses, and international sales add nearly $5 billion in revenue for these small businesses. Over the past couple of years, Utah has led the country with the highest export growth rate. Based on your interaction with businesses across the state, as you're campaigning, you're talking to businesses and industry leaders, where do you see the greatest opportunities to build on the international trade and investment success we've had, particularly now as we look towards recovering from the COVID pandemic?
Thank you, Miles. Look, I've never run for governor before, so I've never had all these different cottage meetings and town hall meetings, local leader lunches, breakfasts. You can't get into a community in the state of Utah, and I don't care where you're going, where there aren't markets, there isn't business occurring. And we have, as you've pointed out, a lot of markets where we export. So you have agriculture, you have alfalfa, you have hay. We have in our extraction industry, we have coal, we have high sulfur, low sulfur, high BTU coal. We have oil, very low sulfur, waxy crude oil. We have areas, but what we have in these same areas where we have the economy going and we have exports happening, it's happening in spite of the barriers to markets that exist in an inland state like Utah. That's why I've been very bullish as speaker. My last year as speaker, we worked really hard to create a Utah Inland Port Authority, a board and a process to make sure that we could see, and I hope very soon, a system of U.S. custom bonded ports that would allow for the existing economies and existing exports we have now, lowering those barriers because we have a superior rail system. We have a rail system from every coastal port in the West Coast. Finds its way into the state of Utah somewhere, not in the same place, but somewhere. We have a road system of I-15 that starts in Alaska, goes through Canada, Western United States, and through Mexico. You have I-80 that goes through up across the country, same as I-70. We have airports, the only rebuild of an international airport in the country that also includes increased freight capacity plus other good airports in our state. If inland ports work, and they do around this world, and they are an ecosystem for greater and stronger economic activity than an inland port in Utah with all of those transportation infrastructure advantages I've just described, it is going to lower those barriers that exist for the existing industries today and sectors we have today. Plus, it will be an ecosystem to see more manufacturing, more jobs that will be drawn to those. That's easier said than done, but that's the work of a governor. That's what you have to do to make sure that we can make that global supply chain even stronger, become a link in that global supply chain. As we talked about the heritage of this state, it's hand in glove with the opportunities that we have to be a major exporter and receiving of imports from around the world.
If you're just joining us, this is a special candidate forum. The GOP candidates for the Republican nominee for governor right here on KSL News Radio. Boyd Matheson here along with Miles Hasen from World Trade Center, Utah, asking the questions. We currently have Greg Hughes in the hot seat. And Greg, as we talk about prosperity, a lot of the unrest we see around the country in particular, there seems to always be this haves and have-nots. As we talk about prosperity here in the state of Utah, how do we ensure that our minority, our multicultural, and our rural communities are all part of a prosperous future in the state?
Thank you, Boyd. It's an important question. Look, growing the economic pie, if you do it right, it hits every demographic you've just described. We do have a tale of two worlds right now. We have 29 counties in the state of Utah, and we have 4 counties along the Wasatch Front: Utah County, Salt Lake County, Davis County, and Weber. We have shoehorned in it's infrastructure, water, railroads, but population. 80% of Utah's population lives in just 4 counties in this valley. It's a mountainous valley of 130 miles. It's packed up. It's pretty crowded. Congestion failure. Cost of living's high. You have at least 22 counties that have never seen a day of economic growth. This spans the different demographics, different Utahns of all different walks of life. If you grow this economic pie and we're able to do the things I've described, where you have a U.S. custom bonded port, bringing infrastructures throughout the rest of the state. We connect these rail spurs in a very efficient way. We bring water. You need water to grow, and we have water, but we need stronger water infrastructure. When you bring the roads and you widen these roads and let commerce occur on these roads outside of just 4 counties, bringing that investment as a state to counties that have never seen it before, you are reaching you're reaching Utahns from all walks of life. That rising tide lifts all ships, and that's how you see economic prosperity and opportunity for all of Utahns. And I'm telling you, this won't work if we're not doing it that way. You can't keep shoehorning it all into 4 counties only. This is the play for the state of Utah going forward, and there is no stronger play for the rest of this state to see the whole state grow and have those economic opportunities than through becoming a link in the global supply chain. Where it's just waiting for us. The state's been talking about this since 1978 in terms of inland port, a system of ports. How do we do it? It's time to get that accomplished.
All right, Miles, next question.
Yeah. You know, Greg, let's talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on global markets. There's no question that we're seeing a premium on shorter supply chains, more diversified supply chains, which creates opportunities here in Utah to build our manufacturing base, to bring companies from overseas back here to the state of Utah. There's been we've been shown that we need to be prepared. We need to be in a position to be self-reliant. At the same time, something that's been nagging on my mind for the past couple of weeks is we're seeing a rise in protectionist sentiment. We're seeing more popular support for putting up trade barriers, whether it's tariffs or limiting foreign investment. And that inevitably increased costs for producers. It increased costs for consumers. It creates a drag on our economy. And so my question is this: as governor, how would you balance the need to be prepared and self-reliant while ensuring that as a state we don't lose sight of the critical role free and open global markets have played in building so much growth and prosperity across the state for decades?
Thank you, Miles. Look, I look to this president and what he's brought since the day he was elected and his understanding of our trade and our trade relationships. Look, NAFTA, back in the day, I probably was on Al Gore's side instead of Ross Perot's, thinking that NAFTA would be a great advantage. 680,000 jobs were outsourced in the United States, and that's a number from 1994 to 2010, not including this last decade. 80% of those were manufacturing jobs. TPP, going out, Trans-Pacific Partnership, we saw more outsourcing of jobs happen there. Our trade deficits have been growing. If you look at the phase 1 agreement with President Trump, our administration, and China, this is the way to do it. This phase 1 said, look, life's got to be a two-way street. You got 400 million in your middle class. It's buying power. We want to be able to meet your markets or reach your markets. You lower your tariffs. You can't have high tariffs for the United States and then enjoy no tariffs at all as you come into our country. We're going to do it the same way. What you see in the phase 1 agreement is you've seen the lowering of tariffs by China for our goods coming across the country. You've seen some duties that have become exempt. It's just a phase 1. There's much more work to be done. But when you see that, and also a commitment from China to really be committed to buying the things that we produce here in the United States. We in turn lowered some of those tariffs that the president had raised because life was not a two-way street. I love the way the president's looking at trade partners, saying we're going to have to do this in a way where you treat people the way you want to be treated. I don't know that NAFTA, TPP did that. I do know that phase 1 with China is working towards that. But look, what's interesting about Utah, when you look at those opportunities, we have not seen trade increase in the state of Utah with China as we've seen growing by 200+% around the country. I think we got to be focused. I think that's going to take leadership. As Speaker of the House, we had a unique relationship with a province in China. Look, you can't disregard. Our kids are learning Mandarin Chinese in that dual language immersion I described. These kids are our future. We can let spy games be spy games. We want to protect intellectual property, but we have things like coal. We have things like oil. We have agriculture, hay and alfalfa. We have partnerships that we could create and strengthen right now that really aren't realizing its potential. And so I love how the president has stared at these trade agreements. We've walked away from some that were fundamentally not fair. It wasn't fair trade. And he's exploring and really pushing China to be fair in this trade relationships. But Utah should be taking greater advantage of that right now.
All right, next question. We've got about 4.5 minutes to go here, and we're looking at some of the challenges, obviously, that face the state of Utah economically and the opportunities as well. So I want you to project forward, Greg, and look at the first 100 days of a Hughes administration. Tell us, what are the biggest risks facing the Utah economy, and what would you do specifically? What actions would you take in those first 100 days?
Well, look, we got to give this economy in Utah even a chance to get on its feet again. We're in this color code right now where we're restricting assembly of people, the right to assemble, how many people can be in the same room. We're still trying to trickle out this economy. You cannot burn down the village to save the village. We have to let people get back to work. You can't even open your schools if you're not back to work. We live in difficult times. We have a virus that's here. It's taught us. We don't have the time to talk about it, but that self-reliance that we need to have, it's not protectionism, or you can use the word protectionism, but we have the opportunity to create a lot more manufacturing through these inland ports. But we have to be self-reliant. We don't want the supply chain to be interrupted or wait for things to come from abroad. If those supply chains are interrupted, like a virus, we need to be able to make those things right now. First hour, first day on the job, we have to have this economy back and running. We have to be able to attract. If there's manufacturing that needs to come back to this country so that we can be self-reliant and we can send good things overseas, the state of Utah is the place it can happen better than any other place in the country. And look, I have a track record for it. As speaker, when we went to Switzerland, largest rail car manufacturer in Europe, looking to come to the United States, looking at coastal ports, looking all over, we showed them that there were great advantages in coming to the state of Utah. We brought GoEd, Governor's Office of Economic Development, with us. We brought higher ed to show that we could train workforce. 370, almost 400 jobs are here now after they've domiciled here in Utah in just 3 years. Millions of dollars of suppliers and new supplies happening, more companies coming in. We've done it. I've done it as Speaker of the House, and I can certainly do it to a much greater extent as Governor of the state of Utah. We are a young state and we are a healthy state, and our prospects of becoming the leader in the global supply chain, exports especially, but imports as well, imports and exports, we stand at a place and an advantage that no other state has. And but it takes work to get there. And I'd ask for your listener support for the Hughes Iverson ticket, because we've worked on these things as public servants, and we can do even more.
All right, Miles, a quick question, and Greg, about a minute for the response.
Greg, final closing statement from your side.
I thought I was being succinct.
No, you did great. We're ahead of time here. Final thoughts. What else? What else? We're talking about economy, international engagement. What is the last thing you want the listeners to take away about how you would lead as governor out there on the global stage?
Miles, what I would say, and you know this because, again, we've traveled together in these with the goal. We have to have measurable goals. I'm not interested in what Forbes ranks Utah or says that we've done a phenomenal job in this virus right now. I'm not interested in what Harvard says. I heard these rankings that were thrown out there. You know who I'm meeting with? I'm meeting with business owners, small business owners. I'm meeting with Utahns whose jobs and their household income has been interrupted. This virus is being felt. The full weight of this virus is being borne on the backs of working people of this state. And Utah needs a governor that understands that, appreciates that, is not heralding all the great success happening right now because people are hurting. But the way forward is exactly what we're talking about. And this is why I'm glad that we're having this discussion and hosted by and really pushed by our World Trade Center and Miles Hasen, your leadership. We can do this through all the things we've just discussed. We have such a great advantage in this global economy and bringing manufacturing back to America, but specifically to Utah, making our own pharmaceuticals, finding ways to get these products that we make overseas, exports to play. And then again, if we want to trade, just make sure we have a president like President Trump, making sure that trade is a fair trade and life's a two-way street. That's what we get with this president. I support this president, not afraid to say it. And as governor, it's a lot of hard work, as you well know, but it's work worth doing. It's been hard up till now. You get a lot of pushback on inland ports, but it's good to see that all the candidates now for governor, they embrace it. They see the vision, and it's important for our state.
All right. Former Speaker of the House, Greg Hughes, candidate for governor here in the state of Utah. Greg, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. If you're just joining us, you are listening to a live forum for the Republican Party's nomination for governor in the state of Utah. I'm Boyd Matheson, opinion editor of the Deseret News and host of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Pleased to be joined today by my tag team partner, Miles Hasen, CEO of World Trade Center Utah, doing some great work over there as well. As we get to the top of the hour, a quick station ID. You are listening to KSL FM Midvale, KSL AM Salt Lake City. And again, this is part of our special coverage, a 90-minute forum today with each of the four candidates on the Republican side for governor. And we're talking the economics of it all and Utah's unique role in the world. And we have one candidate to go. And so we're just standing by as Thomas Wright, former chairman of the Utah Republican Party, will be logging in and joining us. And Miles, a fascinating conversation thus far. And we've got one candidate to go. And anything from the World Trade Center perspective that we should be thinking about as we go towards the back part of this forum today?
You know, Boyd, I think for one, a lot of gratitude that all the candidates, there's a lot they could be doing right now. So grateful that they'd all take time to share their thoughts with us. You know, a couple of key takeaways as I see it. One, clearly, we've got a great bench of candidates here for the GOP nomination. All of them have demonstrated their commitment to continue to lead Utah on the global stage and an awareness of the way that we need to leverage this global engagement to bring very real benefits for Utah companies. And so it's been encouraging over the past three conversations. I'm sure Thomas, look forward to hearing what he has to say as we run through our questions with him.
All right, fantastic. And that's Miles Hasen, CEO of the World Trade Center Utah. I am Boyd Matheson, opinion editor at the Deseret News. If you've missed any of the forum today, you can listen to that on demand on KSL News Radio's KSL Politics podcast or Inside Sources podcast on KSL News Radio app or kslnewsradio.com or wherever you get your podcasts these days. Important conversation about the future of the country and the future of Utah in it, as well as around the world. And so we're very pleased now to be joined by our fourth and final candidate today. Thomas Wright is joining us. There he is. Thomas, how you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me on, Boyd, and nice to see you, Miles, so to speak.
All right. We're safely social distancing all the way around. And so we're going to get right at it. We've got 17 minutes on the clock. And so we're going to go for it here, Thomas. Thomas, as you know, as a business person, that Utah really since its founding has had this history of entrepreneurship and not just being content to be here in the West. We are a model of a free market economy, strong institutions of civil society, a great window in, window out to the world in terms of a laboratory of democracy. So I want you to think in terms of what is your role, what is your responsibility as a governor to continue that legacy, to make sure Utah continues not only to prosper here at home, but around the country and around the world?
Well, we can leverage our advantages by letting people know about our language skills, our quality of life, diversity, knowledge of markets, the languages we speak, the cultures we understand, Utah's amazing technical colleges, public and private universities, and look what we've done in the high-tech sector. Utahns have a strong history as global citizens. Our friends and neighbors speak dozens of languages. We've showed that during the Olympics, for example, how we can welcome the world to Utah. And despite being a small state, we have an international airport with direct flights daily to Europe, Canada, I believe Mexico, and I just read that Seoul, South Korea could be added as a likely destination. So we need to do more to recruit multinational companies to Utah. We've done really well locally with our local businesses, and we have a great tech sector, but in many ways we've underperformed on this multinational company advantage that we could have. So we have a great small business community, like I said, and a tech community, but we've got to attract multinational corporations to Utah when they're considering relocation. And so as governor, I want to explore why we're not finding them and then formalize a plan to do better. And I believe Utah's international engagement is an important aspect of our economy. So in our search for overseas markets, we can't lose focus of what is important here at home. We've got to continue to support our great economy here in Utah, our private sector, and we've got to be able to leverage our international investments and our international opportunities. So more than ever before, innovation will drive Utah and the world's economies. So we need to make sure that we're investing in our education system. That has to be the most important long-term priority for Utah if we want to sustain and advance our position in the world. So I would say that we need to look at our state and local tax structures. We need to look at deregulating the economy, making sure government's getting out of the way. But we also need to make sure that Utah maintains its image as a world-class business destination.
All right. Next question goes over to Miles.
Thomas, thank you for making time to be with us today. It's great to see you on screen.
Yeah.
A little bit of data to tee up a question. So international trade and investment supports nearly 1 in 4 jobs here in the state of Utah. We all know that small business is the backbone of Utah's economy, and 85% of exporters here in the state are small businesses. And international sales add nearly $5 billion in revenue for these small businesses every single year. Utah has led the country with the highest export growth rate over the past couple of years. And so based on your interaction with businesses across the state, as you're out there campaigning, meeting with people, understanding their needs and the opportunities we have here in our state, where do you see the greatest opportunities, either from businesses or from an industry perspective, to build on the international trade and investment success we've had, particularly now as we look towards recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, let me tell you, being on the campaign trail is so much fun. Utahns are incredible. They're so competitive. And we know that when we are on a level playing field in Utah, we can compete with anyone. We're not afraid of competition, and we're naturally open and trusting of other peoples and cultures. So we need to do more to promote Utah and its businesses globally. We have great tech, biotech, defense. We've got great natural resource industries. They need our help in promoting them globally. And despite COVID, globalization will continue, and we will need to continue trade. There are great opportunities, for example, in Central America and South America for the medical devices that we're producing and other technologies we have. We have to build on our successes globally with our biomed and tech, defense and medical fields. The pandemic has really taught us one thing, and that's something we probably should have learned a long time ago, and that is reliance on a hostile country for critical raw materials and products is a recipe for disaster. Price gouging and limited and non-existent supplies of products and logistical challenges has plagued the U.S. response to the pandemic, and it's happened to us here in Utah. So this isn't just limited to the current health crisis. Our reliance on hostile or unreliable countries to provide key strategic materials threatens our long-term military operational status and limits our ability to produce highly advanced products. So we need to make sure that we encourage additional investment in our state. Utah is uniquely positioned to address the healthcare supply issues with a world-class biomed, pharma, and device manufacturing company community. And we need to make sure also, as I was reminded of this in Richfield last night, we need to make sure that our mining sector is well positioned to support the domestic supply of key metals and minerals. And that includes copper, magnesium, and beryllium.
All right, thank you. There's a lot of unrest, obviously, in the country, and some here, even in the state of Utah. Much of it gets down to this sort of haves and the have-nots in many instances. As we look to the future, as we look to the economy, as we look to Utah prospering, how do we make sure we get past the haves and the have-nots? How do we make sure that our minority communities, our multicultural communities, and especially our rural communities, that they are part of that success and part of that prosperity? What would you do as governor?
Well, we need to make sure we help our minority communities not only start businesses and own businesses, but we need to make sure that they are succeeding. And we do a great job of welcoming people to the world, and we should do nothing less than for them when it comes to economic opportunities. We need to make sure that we're looking at that and that we're paying attention to that. That's really important. When it comes to rural communities, let me tell you, they have been ignored for so long in rural Utah. It's one of the hardest things I've seen on the campaign trail. We need to prioritize rural Utah and recognize that a graduating senior in Price or Richfield or Kanab or Tremonton is no less capable than someone in Salt Lake City. They just need opportunity in rural Utah. In today's interconnected society, business can be done anywhere. We need to get them broadband and mentoring so we can create new economic hotspots in rural Utah. There's so much opportunity there. We've talked about rural Utah for years, but the challenge in getting supplies to and from this area adds costs for businesses. That's why the inland port and satellite ports around the state could really help. That, with other incentives, tax rates and tax credits, and creating opportunity zones in rural Utah to level the playing field, will really help. And I want to focus on all of those areas the first 100 days I'm governor, and have a rural economic diversification plan, always working with local leaders to make sure we have the education and the infrastructure and the training. Utah, we have to invest in our public and higher education system. I think that is so critical. And I said it in the previous answer, and I want to say it again. We've got to bridge the distance between urban and rural in Utah. And you do that by investing in infrastructure so that all students have a level playing field to compete in the global economy.
All right, if you're just joining us, special forum here on Inside Sources today on KSL News Radio. I'm Boyd Matheson, opinion editor at the Deseret News, joined by Miles Hasen, CEO of World Trade Center Utah. We've been interviewing each of the four candidates for governor here in the state of Utah on the Republican side. And Miles, the next question for Thomas Wright goes to you.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Boyd. So, Thomas, in a previous response, you hit on a couple of points I think are really important. So I think I would like to go a little bit deeper on that. You know, you talked about how COVID is put into the forefront, the need for us to be prepared, to make sure that we're self-reliant, that we aren't reliant on a hostile country that is, responsible for, key products and supplies, that we need to keep ourselves safe and healthy and make sure we're secure and keep the economy going. And that is so true and so important for us as a state to make sure we're thinking seriously about being prepared, that we're thinking about being self-reliant, and making sure that the terms of trade are both free and fair. One thing that's been a nagging concern on my mind is as we focus on that, the pendulum at times can swing a little bit too far. And what we're seeing is that there is a rise in protectionist sentiments here in the United States and many other countries in the world. And as people are, desperate for security, we're seeing increasing popularity for bringing up trade barriers, for slowing down foreign investment, to increase costs for doing trade. And I'd be curious to get your thoughts as governor. How would you balance the need to be prepared, to be self-reliant, to make sure that as we're engaging with our national leaders internationally, that we are making sure we're advocating for free and fair trade, while at the same time making sure that we don't lose sight of the critical role that these open global markets have played in building so much growth and prosperity across the state for decades?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, Miles. It's really well said. Let me just first start off by saying that one of the things we need to do to make sure that we don't have we need to make sure China is not ripping us off and stealing our trade secrets and our intellectual property. We need to have patent law in this country. We need to protect those who create ideas. And that's one of the biggest challenges I think we have with China, is they're constantly stealing our intellectual property. We've also learned in COVID, as you said, that we need to be self-reliant. We cannot rely on the federal government or other producers in China for personal protective equipment. I've been really uncomfortable with that. We can never let that mistake happen again. We need to incentivize local businesses to add to the supply chain for critical health equipment. And we've seen that with Merit Medical. Their CEO, Fred Lampropoulos, has endorsed me in this race because he believes we need more business people in government. But I've been out to that facility. They retooled the facility with their engineers to be able to create COVID testing. We waited too long in the state of Utah to call on our own industries to do that. And the United States needs to learn in this particular case, as does the state of Utah. We cannot be reliant on foreign or international sources for personal protective equipment. We can never do that to our healthcare professionals again. But why we do that, as you said, Miles, we can't turn inward and put up trade barriers with the rest of the world. So it's a fine line. It's a balancing act. We can't give up our competitive advantages, but we have to protect our businesses. So we just have to make sure that when we're looking at these disruptions in the supply chain, that we have more vertical integration. Companies that have vertical integration have done better during this pandemic than those that don't, and we need to encourage that. So it's a fine balancing act that I understand, and as governor, I want to address that with our local business leaders. But let's never put ourselves in that position again of putting our healthcare professionals who are risking their lives at the expense of not having all this personal protective equipment here in Utah.
All right, coming down the home stretch here with Thomas Wright, the final candidate on our special forum today on KSL News Radio. Thomas, you've mentioned both your business experience and background and how you approach things from a business perspective. Obviously, we want to look at Utah's economy and your role if you were to be the governor. To make sure that continues, that we overcome economic barriers, that we create paths to prosperity. And so I want you to take just a couple of minutes and talk about what would first 100 days of a Wright administration look like? What barriers, what risks would you be getting out of the way? And what would you be driving in terms of policy or action in those critical first 100 days?
Well, the first 100 days are the most exciting, Boyd. I can't sleep at night thinking about how much we could get done. Number one is we need to make sure that we come out of this pandemic stronger than we went into it. We have a lot of Utahns that are unemployed. So the very first thing that we need to do is we need to identify the career pathways and connect our unemployed citizens that want retraining with those career pathways using our vocational and technical schools and our systems of higher education. By doing that, they can find careers that they never probably thought were possible. We've had a shortage in so many of the trades, right? Machinists, mechanics, plumbing, electrical, so many areas, right? And there's so many things that we can do. So I want to connect all of those institutions and our technical colleges with our citizens. They are the ones that invested in them all these years. They're the ones that should benefit. And I want to do that right out of the gate. We also need to make sure that we deal with our growth issues. And the growth issues are related to transportation infrastructure. And that includes in rural Utah, the lack of funding they have for their transportation infrastructure. They are not getting enough investment, but we've got to make sure we balance the urban and rural component. We also need to make sure that we're looking at water. Water is a long-term challenge for the state of Utah. And in the first 100 days, I want to start to put a plan together to make sure that we are using our water resources effectively. We're conserving water, but we're not losing claim to our water rights as the water flows beyond our borders. So, and I would say the other thing is affordable housing. It makes me really uncomfortable that we're 55,000 housing units short in this state. There are families that are dealing with a lot of ramifications of that. Behavioral health challenges with their children not meeting their potential in school. I want to tackle the affordable housing challenge right out of the gate and put a plan together with local municipalities and cities, never being heavy-handed with them, but helping to inspire and identify opportunities that we can help get more people into housing. And just finally, I'd say our education. I've stressed it, not just on the technical and retraining. We need to make sure we're treating our teachers with respect. Our human capital is what makes Utah great. We don't have the best economy in the world or in the country because of government. We have it because of our people, because our government gets out of the way. Let's look at regulation and make sure it's as good as it can be. I believe there's so much more that we can do to deregulate our economy. Let's make sure our tax structure's fair so that everybody gets to benefit from our success, not just a few with loopholes. And let's spread out the prosperity and motivate our citizens to get back out onto the workforce. That's how we're going to get Utah back on its feet. And those will be the things that I focus on in my first 100 days. I'm really excited about them. And I'm running for governor because I love to work. I understand the value of hard work. I've been looking at balance sheets and profit and loss statements for 12 years. I know how the economy works. I know how to get Utahns back to work. I'm not a professional politician. And the first 100 days, people would see a dramatic change and a shift in how the state of Utah was being operated.
All right. And I think we got time to squeeze in one quick question. Miles, if you want to get one final thing, we've got about 2 minutes to go, and you get the last word.
It's great. Thank you, Thomas, for being with us. That was a great overview of both issues and also your background. Voters have ballots in hand. I received mine in the mail just a couple of days ago. What's the last thing that you'd like to let voters know about you as we conclude our discussion today?
Well, for 16 years, we've had the same people handing the baton of power back and forth to each other. And while they're good people, I believe that we need new perspectives in state government. I don't think the same people there for an extended period of time creates the sharpest outcomes. And so I would just say, look, we've done well in Utah. We need to build on those successes. And we need to continue to build on them as we've talked today, Miles. I mean, we've talked a lot about diversifying our economies, right? And attracting multinational corporations and opening up those supply chains and eliminating protectionism that's still looking out for Utah businesses. We need to continue to do all that. But we also have some challenges. We need to get 200,000 people back to work. And so Governor Wright, when he walks into the Capitol on day one, is going to be all about looking out for the taxpayer. I'm going to sit in the governor's office and I'm going to think about how do we make our tax structure more fair? How do we look out for the little guy? I represent the little guy in this race. I don't have the big endorsements. I don't have the big money behind me. I'm running as somebody who's never held public elected office. And I hear all the time people say, how do we get new people into government? This is their opportunity in the state of Utah to elect somebody that's qualified, experienced, conservative, and will be looking out for them at every turn. And by doing that, we can keep Utah on top. That's how we got there. Let's continue to do the things that got us there by putting a fresh perspective and putting Utah's talented people in office. There's so many talented people in this state. I want to be a governor of the people, one that listens to them, that partners with them and says to them, how do we solve the problems in your local community? And then let's get to work. Let's roll up our sleeves and let's do what we do in Utah. And that's work hard and make it happen.
All right. That's candidate Thomas Wright joining us on our special forum here on KSL News Radio, Inside Sources. Thomas, thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you, Boyd. Thank you, Miles, for having me on.
Thank you.
All right. And there you have it. Those are the 4 GOP candidates for the nomination for governor in the state of Utah. Some fascinating conversation today here on KSL News Radio. Been great to be with Miles Hasen, CEO of World Trade Center Utah, really giving us that international perspective and flair and focus in terms of where the opportunities are. Miles, just in our closing minutes here, obviously ballots are out. They are hitting mailboxes as we speak. Engaging in the process is important. Being an informed voter is even more important. What are some of the things that you're thinking about now, having listened to these 4 candidates over the last 90 minutes, that you hope voters will be thinking about as they get ready to mark their ballots and send them in?
Yeah, that's a great question, Boyd. And wow. Inside Sources is normally the quickest 60 minutes on the radio. I think we've learned today that the same is true when we go for the full 90 minutes. I can't believe that we've already been on air now for just about 90 minutes. And again, deeply grateful to all the candidates for spending time with us today. As I listen to the candidates and I think about, this responsibility and the accountability that all voters have to think deeply about who to vote for. This is a sacred opportunity that we have here in our state and our country that is not the case in many of the places that I've lived previously. In fact, 1 out of 5 countries I've lived in, do we have this opportunity? I would encourage listeners and voters to think deeply about where they want the state to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We are at a generational moment, in my opinion, here in the state. There is so much challenge. With challenge comes opportunity. And we listened today that each candidate has a distinct perspective and background and experience that they would bring to the governorship if they're elected. And so I'd really encourage listeners to think about that long-term vision they have for the state. Think about what they've heard today and from the candidates in other forums and debates, and then to go ahead and choose that candidate and vote for that candidate that seems best equipped to deliver on that vision that all of us individually have. And I think that here in Utah, we've got such great social cohesion that there's a lot of unity in vision and purpose across the state. So it's going to be fascinating to see how this unfolds over the next couple of weeks.
That's right. We are coming down the home stretch. June 30th is the official primary day. And of course, ballots are hitting mailboxes. Many of us have already received them. We've had a number of folks text in and say they've cast their vote today. Hopefully those were listening to the forum, getting some insight on the candidates, and then casting an informed vote as they move everything forward. If you missed any of the forum today, you can listen to it in its entirety. Today's forum will be available to listen to on demand on KSL News Radio's KSL Politics podcast, also available on Inside Sources podcast. And again, you can get those on the KSL News Radio app, or you can get those at kslnewsradio.com or wherever your favorite podcast pickup location is. You can do that today as well. A couple of things that I hope everyone is really paying attention to and thinking through. Whenever you're listening to a candidate, it's so important to kind of reflect and say, okay, as I listen to this candidate, did they talk in generalities or did they talk in specifics? I love kind of getting to that. Can they get to the nitty gritty of it? Can you see them as a leader? What kind of vision do you have as you listen to them? Do you find yourself just thinking about the candidate? Or do you find yourself thinking about yourself and your family, your neighborhood, your community? Those are all really important things to look at. Vision matters. Leadership is going to be so important in this state moving into the next decade, which is what we should be looking at. We have a unique opportunity to really lead out. Again, very grateful to our partners at World Trade Center Utah, Miles Hasen. Miles, thanks for joining us today. 30 seconds, a final thought.
Thank you, Boyd. This was a fantastic partnership. We appreciate you and the KSL team for partnering with us on this. Final thoughts is we all have reason to be optimistic. We all should have confidence. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. There's a lot of fear. We have great leadership here in the state. We've had great leadership for decades, and that's going to continue here over the coming months and years. And I think all of us can use that optimism, use the position that we're in as a state to really lead out. And we have an opportunity here as a state. You think about, the light on the hill, and that's why we've thought about America. I think moving forward, Washington is going to get worse at doing its job. We have a lot of division and gridlock, but that puts a premium on states. And there's an opportunity for us here as a state to really lead out. And through our international engagement, it's an opportunity for us to make our candlestick a little bit taller so that light can shine a little bit brighter. And the leadership that we choose is so important to lead us out in that effort. And so this is a very consequential election and a primary, and really encourage people to think deeply about that, and then make sure they go out and vote, and so that their voice can be heard and they can participate in this very important process.
All right. Fantastic. Miles Hasen, CEO of World Trade Center Utah, special gubernatorial candidate forum today here on a 90-minute edition of Inside Sources. I am Boyd Matheson, opinion editor at the Deseret News. It has been wonderful to be with you. And as on all days, vote, and then make sure you go out into the world and see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference. Stay with us here on KSL News Radio.